If you ask any overachieving business student what career path they want to pursue, 99% will probably say,
well, I'm not sure yet, but I'm deciding between finance and consulting.
If that sounds like you, keep watching this video. Keeners, welcome back to Jumpstart Your Career with me, Gary. Today, we'll be helping you decide which is a better career path for you, finance or consulting. To do so, we will compare the two careers against 5 benchmarks. How much money you make, how prestigious is it, how good is your work-life balance going to be, what is the actual work itself, and is it interesting, and finally, what are the exit opportunities after you leave. And with that being said, let's begin with the most important question. Which one makes more money?
Show me the money!
And to help us answer these questions, I've invited my friend Kelly on the podcast.
So I'm Kelly. I went to Western University at Ivy Business School. From there, in third year, I worked at Goldman Sachs in sales and trading before moving on to BCG for management consulting for full-time.
With a background in both finance and consulting, she's the perfect person to ask these questions to. And starting off with money, how much money can you make in finance out of undergrad?
Here are some figures.
Yeah.
There will be a big range depending on so many factors too, right? Depending on your performance, which firm you're joining. But for instance, in New York for investment banking, or even in Toronto, your base could be 100 to 150. That's a great base salary just coming out of university. And then your bonus, it's very dependent on, again, a lot of factors like your performance, the market, your firm performance, But it could be like even up to 100% or maybe even more, maybe a bit less than your base. All of these are also big ballpark estimates.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. It could be plus or minus several tens of thousands.
Okay, so that's investment banking.
Yeah.
What about the other popular paths?
Yeah, so for sales and trading, I would say the base is quite similar. Like you're looking at somewhere like 100 to 150. Then your bonus could also be quite high, also depending on very similar factors as that, right? On which desk you're in. Because in sales and trading, it's not just, you're working and it's like the whole entire firm, but you're part of a group. You could be on equities, you can be on fixed income. You're part of these specific divisions, and that will matter.
I've always wondered this. Which one makes more money? Investment banking or sales and trading?
I think it's so dependent.
Because I've heard investment bankers usually make more.
Maybe on average, you might make more, but it's hard to say because if you are a top trader, you might be making a lot more money at an earlier age because your bonus is just really high.
Okay.
Versus a investment banker who is an analyst or associate. But if you're somehow a really good trader, maybe. But I think that this is me speculating.
Okay, but overall, which one do you think makes more money? Investment banking or sales and trading?
Hard to say.
Really? Okay,
I'm not entirely sure because in sales and trading, you could be working at, say, a prop trading fund or some kind of other fund that is not a bulge bracket bank, and some of those have really good compensation opportunities too.
Okay, so we'll just settle for the fact that they both make a lot of money. How does your salary and your bonuses grow in finance?
Yeah, looking at investment banking, some private equity figures, I heard these from some of my friends. So as an associate in finance in banking in New York, you could get 300 to 400, and that's the post-MBA role. And that's after your first promotion. So once you get promoted from analyst to associate, you could be looking at 300 to 400. Similarly in PE.
Oh, okay. So you're starting probably at around 200K and then it's going to shoot up to 400K after a few years.
Yeah, I think this is all assuming good performance too.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But then once you get from associate to VP director level, it goes up even more. And you could be looking at, say, okay, now it's 375 to 550 for banking, a VP director. Maybe for private equity, it could be 450 to 750 because you could get some carry. It depends on a lot of things again. But that would be the couple roles right before you hit manager director. Yeah.
And how much money do you make as you move up that chain of command?
In consulting, as a manager director, you're not at 1 million yet for the most part. And in banking, I would assume that you can reach past 1 million as a manager director in your first year.
Okay, so lots of money for sure.
Yeah, that's a lot
that's
of money.
Finance.
Yeah.
What about consulting? How much money can you make in consulting right out of undergrad?
It's so dependent on the firm you're in too. MBB and Tier 2 pays a lot. There are some consulting firms that might pay a bit less if you're working at a boutique or some other smaller firm. So maybe a safe range for the base would be 70 to 120. And then the bonus is much lower. The bonus could be 10 to 50% of the base.
Why is consulting bonus so much lower than finance bonus?
Yeah, in finance, so much of the fees and the earnings that they get is dependent on these transactions and these deals that are happening.
Okay.
And when these happen, they get a big payout. For consulting, yes, we are project based, so it is still kind of like deals are happening, but because they're more like stable projects, then it feels a bit less like, all or nothing, because we're selling these projects, pitching these RFPs.
And how does the salary and the bonuses grow as you move up in consulting?
Yeah, so I'll do MBB, for instance. I'll like specifically just my experience at BCG, ballpark numbers. In your first year, you could get base pretty similar to finance, 100 to 150 in that range. Then your bonus, like I mentioned, it could be 10 to 25, 10 to 30%. Once you get past the first promotion, then your salary actually basically doubles after you get your first promotion from our associate, aka the undergrad role, to the post MBA, aka consultant role. And your base could look like 190 to 210, with your bonus being anywhere between, on average, 10 to 50% of that. And then once you progress more at the project leader level, your base could look more like 220 to 240. Then you get another bonus that could be 10 to 50% of your base. And the percentage of your bonus will keep going higher and higher as you progress more. So you'll get more of your comp tied up to your bonus.
Okay.
And then once you get from the project leader level over to principal, partner, aka the levels right before managing director, you'll be escalating higher for all-in package around 300 to 500. And then first year managing director, maybe a bit shy of 1 million.
That's so interesting. Overall, which one do you think makes more money, finance or consulting?
I think that in finance, there's a bigger deviation in earnings. But if we are assuming good performance, especially at the senior level, I would say in finance, you earn more. And especially to give you some fun facts about the hedge fund industry, you could like be in your 20s, like 26, 28, and bring in over 7 figures at that age at a hedge fund. So just imagine you're like 27, you bring in home like $1 million because you're funded well, your performance is good, and that's a lot of money for someone who's in their late 20s. It's not always the case.
When you say 7 figures, like, can you give like a more specific number? Is it like 1 million or is it like 9 million? And like, what is
I would say like 1 to 2 million in that range. That kind of money is possible at a hedge fund. Whereas in consulting, it's not possible for me to be in my late 20s and be like a project leader and bring home 7 figures from consulting. That's just not how salary and bonus works for us. But that kind of exponential potential in something like the hedge fund space is really exciting. And I didn't know anything about that again until recently. A lot of people don't know that that's even possible.
So for the business students who are watching, who are literally just in it for the money, care about money, work for the money, which career path should they go into if they just want money, finance or consulting?
I think it's not so black and white. So yes, sure, like do finance, do investment banking, you'll get paid a large number and that number will continue to grow very quickly. So if it's like a blanket statement, do finance. Keep in mind though that a lot of it can be performance dependent if you are in something like the hedge fund industry, because you could get a year where the markets are down or like the performance is not good or whatever else happens, and you just take back your base salary and you don't get your bonus at all. And if that's the case, then you would earn more in consulting because our base salaries progress quite well. Yeah, like we have pretty good base salaries, and our bonus, even in a bad year, we also get some kind of bonus if you're performing well. It's not so like the deviation is not as big. But again, blanket statement, then do finance. In consulting though, it does set you up quite well with the skill sets if you want to do some other like big money pursuits, right? Like entrepreneurship.
Like be a CEO of Apple.
Exactly. Go into senior leadership at a corporation, also great earnings potential. Do entrepreneurship. Not to say finance people don't do that or can't do that, but consulting skill sets, like when it comes to running projects and working with people and all those like holistic skill set of running a business, you get a lot more of that, I would say.
So maybe it's like if you just want more money in the short term than finance, but if you're thinking maybe more so in the long term, and if you're also like creative and entrepreneurial, then maybe consulting could be a better fit.
I think finance will earn you a lot of money in both the short and long term. If you stick in the industry, the hours are very intense, and it's a certain choice. But yeah, short and long term, like as a finance MD, you're making a ton of money. Like you're making so much money, right?
Yeah.
In consulting, like it's not to say in consulting, every single person is going to go and want to be the next CEO and rise up the ranks, right? They might take a step back in their career. They might do something else too. So it's really depending on personal preference. If it's just about the numbers that you care about, probably blanket statement, finance.
Okay.
Yeah. If it's like, other things that you're interested in, like different types of work that you want to do, different kinds of skill sets, maybe consulting.
Okay, now that the most important question is answered, let's move on to the second pillar, which is prestige. Because let's face it, most of us want to feel good about ourselves. Most of us want to make our parents proud. And most of us want to make our friends a little jealous. So which one do you think is a more prestigious career path, finance or consulting?
I think it depends on which. I know all my answers are like it depends. It depends because you're interviewing a consultant.
Yes.
It depends on which field in finance and consulting and which firm.
Oh.
In finance, these really well-known firms like Goldman Sachs, Blackstone, KKR, in fields like banking, private equity, maybe some other like other investment funds are prestigious, right? But I think a lot of people don't think of some of the other smaller finance firms as being prestigious because they're just not as well known. And then in consulting too, there are many smaller consulting firms, right? Doing not just management consulting, but other types of consulting like HR consulting, like tech consulting. And those might appear less prestigious because people might not know of them as much as they know like, oh, wow, like it's MBB strategy consulting.
Yeah, so it's like don't necessarily think finance is more prestigious than consulting or the other way around. Like, for example, if you work in finance at a smaller boutique investment bank that nobody heard of versus if you work at McKinsey, the level of prestige is obviously going to be different and probably the vice versa.
Yeah.
What about the firms at the top? Which one do you think is more prestigious, MBB consulting or bulge bracket finance, for instance?
I think they're both quite prestigious.
Like they're both up there, yeah.
Yeah. No real like comparison, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. It really depends.
Yeah.
Honestly, these questions are dumb.
No, I love it. Like
Yeah.
it's like it is thought provoking though, right? It's like how would you
Yeah.
compare it? It's kind of like what's more prestigious, like top law firm or like top consulting firm or like top finance firm. If you're top of your field in any field or any industry, even if you have like nothing to do with business, it's like oh like it's a top like art school, right? Or anything. That's prestigious.
Exactly. What the heck does prestige even mean anyways? So let's move on to the third pillar, which is work-life balance. Something that many of us overlook. Thus, what is better for work-life balance, finance or consulting?
Yeah, so let's do investment banking first. Investment banking work-life balance is objectively the hardest. We have protected weekends in consulting for the most part.
Okay.
Investment banking, you could be working almost like any day of the week. I know a lot of friends might have protected Saturdays or protected some days, but sometimes even that protection is not true. Whereas for me, I usually don't have to work much on the weekends. Maybe like as a manager, I would be working a few hours on a Sunday night, and I get like my Friday nights free. I get off Saturday, Sunday, and that's really nice.
Okay.
Yeah, in banking versus consulting, especially in the early years, sometimes in banking, you wait around for comments sometimes during the day, so you might get a bit of like that lull. But in consulting, it's really like go, nonstop, super quick, in MBB consulting anyway. So the per hour intensity is quite high. And then we do squeeze a lot of work in, especially Monday to Wednesday, Monday to Thursday. But overall, the number of hours worked and how grueling the late nights could be and how you might have to work on command, it's banking. That is
Banking?
hard. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I've heard some stories of like banking interns in New York who work for over 120 hours per week. Because, it's only one summer and they want to get that return offer. But it's like they essentially have literally like no life and they're working like 20 hours per day. So that's pretty crazy.
No, you can't know. If it exceeds 100 hours, which has happened in banking, it's really tough. I would say anything above 70 hours a week is already really tough.
Yeah, drinking the coffees, popping the Adderall.
It's insane. Yeah. In consulting, for me, it was more like 55 to 70. 55 is a good week. Anything above 65, it gets tougher. Yeah.
So how many hours do you work on average per week in finance versus consulting?
I think in banking, it would probably look like 60 to 80 if I had to guess, based on my roommates who I lived with who were bankers.
Yeah.
So this is like not entirely made up. I see them working. And then for me, 55 to 70.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a lot better.
Yeah.
Less.
One takeaway is, look, if you think about the number of hours worked per week, every incremental hour you work past the 50-hour mark, it gets harder and harder. And you think between 50 and 60, you might not need to tap away so much into your sleep or social life. But then if you're getting past like the 60, 70-hour weeks, then you're like snagging away your workouts, your sleep,
Yeah.
all like, you know, like your important friends hangouts, all these really, really important things that you don't want to sacrifice. So every incremental hour gets harder.
Where did you come up with this theory of like once you get past the 50-hour mark, it gets harder? Like
Personal experience.
I was like, oh, is there a study done on BCG?
No, it's just
But
like
it's
how much pain
interesting.
am I in?
Haha. Okay, let's move on to the fourth pillar, which is the work itself. Because if you're going to be spending over 80 hours per week working on something, then you should probably know what you're getting yourself into. Overall, which type of work do you think is more intellectually stimulating and more interesting, like finance or consulting?
I think they're both quite intellectually stimulating. However, I would think that in consulting, the range and the broadness is so much bigger, especially MBB consulting. I'm personally touching on so many different topics across so many different industries. I could be doing like pricing for makeup. I could be doing growth strategy for a major bank, or digital transformation, like looking at how their apps are working with their customers. I could be doing cost cutting, like the stereotypical stuff, or working on AI projects. It's so wide, and I could be in so many different cities too, right? And that's also stimulating for me, and I really like that. And I know that if you're working in banking, especially in the junior years, you're working with many of the similar models. Of course, their models are very complex, but you are building like these set of models, and you're looking into many different industries, yes, but if you are classified or you're part of a specific group, like a specific industry, maybe you're just focused on one, like you're just focused on oil and gas.
That does sound kind of boring over time, especially if you're doing it like over and over again.
Yeah, like every single deal that you're working on, it will be different. The business that you're looking at will also be different, the financials and everything, but you won't be like, oh, one day I'm going to do a client team stand-up in Atlanta to talk about their new branding strategy, and then the next month I'm going to go to Chicago and start working on some like CPG, like consumer goods, like packaging ideas and growth strategy for like cookies. Like you're not going to be doing that kind of work in banking, whereas you could actually be doing that kind of work in consulting.
A random question just popped up in my head, but which group of people uses PowerPoint more? Consultants or investment bankers?
I would have to guess on average, consultants use PowerPoints more because bankers spend a lot of time on Excel, but both use a good amount of PowerPoint.
Okay. Interesting.
Coming from personal experience living with my roommates, the percentage of time that they spend on Excel is higher, and we do a lot of stuff in PowerPoint, but we also do stuff in Excel and other programs like Tableau, like Alteryx, or some other programs.
Cool. And finally, we have exit opportunities, which are what are your career options after you eventually leave finance or consulting after a few years? Overall, which career path has better exit opportunities, finance or consulting?
Again, looking at investment banking versus strategy like management consulting. At the early years, actually, a lot of the exit opportunities are quite similar. So if you did like tiers of banking versus tiers of consulting, you can both apply, and many people do actually apply for very similar positions. Like you could both go and do like biz ops. You can both go and transfer over to some kind of corporate role. Maybe in banking, you'll want to do something like corp dev. Maybe in consulting, you'll do like corporate strategy. But if you are in finance, like an investment kind of role, like in a hedge fund, then if you're in there for a long time, your exit ops will be narrower. Since if you spent 5 years trading government bonds, it'll be harder for you to go and pivot that easily into some kind of equally or similarly high level of seniority into a startup, corporate, any of those things, because their skill sets are a little bit different at that point. And then in consulting, because we touch on so many different projects, like I've had to be like an HR expert, and then like, finance expert, operations expert, expert, yeah. I'm like, expert, please put that in quotes. It's like I touch on these topics for executives, so I feel like I'm actually like kind of exposed to a lot of these corporate functions, whether it's at a corporate or a startup, and I work on these topics too. And I work on things like project management and strategy and running operations. That skill set is quite applicable to really like a lot of things.
So are you saying that essentially in the beginning, both are very similar, but as you spend more time in finance, your exit options becomes more narrow and less. But in consulting, it's like the other way around. The more time you spend, your exit options maybe like grow bigger.
Oh, so not quite. In investment banking and consulting, yes. Early on, you both have a pretty wide set of exit opportunities.
Yeah.
Banking, consulting, early on, wide. As you get more senior in both banking and consulting, your exit ops might be a bit more narrow.
Oh, so it gets
if
narrow
you,
even in consulting.
yeah,
Okay.
because you might want to go for like, if you're like, you know, a consulting partner, you might want to go and jump into a more senior role at a corporate because we work with corporate clients for the most part. In finance, like if you go really high in banking, like maybe you still want to jump ship somewhere, but you're not going to go and do like biz ops at a startup if you're, you know, like a director in investment banking.
So like overall, which career path do you think is more flexible and offers more exit opportunities? Like consulting or finance?
I think if I had to put a blanket statement on it, consulting is more flexible just because you are touching on so many things and developing so many different types of skills. And I think that working in consulting can help you realize what you like to do and what you don't because you get to do so many different types of work, right? You could be doing like an execution case where you're running stand-ups and doing actual project execution with your client teams. And that is a different role versus, oh, I'm just going to go and do due diligence for private equity clients versus I'm going to do strategy, build a strategy roadmap for another corporate client. And in finance, one of my worries for sales and trading was that it wouldn't really match what I would want to do in the future in terms of the exit ops. And that's another reason why I personally pivoted as well.
Yeah. And just to conclude this video, one last question I'll ask you is, if someone is really struggling to choose between finance and consulting, what is your one piece of advice to them?
I think it's really important to go and try and explore all these dimensions that we just talked about. We just talked about it at a surface level, but really you should go and explore and talk to more people who are currently working in these roles. Remember, there are many roles in finance. Remember that even in consulting, depending on which firm you join, the work could look really different. And think about what makes sense for your own goals, what makes sense for what you want to do right now, what is a good thing to do for the next couple of years. And now there are so many of these day in the life videos too that I find really helpful.
This is what it's like to spend a 12-hour day in the office. Men used to go to war and now they wake up exhausted and edit spreadsheets all day long.
Come with me for a day in the life of a 23-year-old in consulting. The day begins by filming myself and pretending to be sleepy, followed by adequate dental hygiene and a hearty breakfast.
Whereas before, I didn't know any of these. I just know, well, like the stereotypical, oh, you make impact in consulting, you travel, you work with clients, but now you can see all these resources online that people are posting. So do your research. And if possible, maybe you can do like an internship in one of them and not the other, and then see how you like that internship. And you could try to pivot like me for full time.
Okay, Keeners, thanks so much for watching this video, and I really hope it helped you decide which is a better career path for you, finance or consulting. If you haven't already, make sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast because in our next video, we will continue our conversation with Kelly and learn more about how did she get into BCG and her time as a management consultant. So stay tuned, and here's a sneak peek for next week's video. Can you walk us through the resume that you used to get into BCG?
Yeah, of course. One big tip I would have for any resume, not just for BCG, is
Yeah. So what was your networking strategy when you recruited for BCG?
quality over quantity. There are definitely people who will have more of an impact than others, and will be one of them.
What is the one thing that can make someone stand out during their recruitment process for BCG?
Every time we engage with you, it needs to feel like we can